The last few weeks, the gospel has switched from Mark to John. Mark is very short. And what we've heard the last few weeks is the bread of life discourse. And we have to remember John's gospel was written many years after the three synoptic gospels, the first three. And John was trying to give the perspective of his time, his older age, and he wrote the gospels with a view to give the people further ideas and theology of what Christ said. The account of the Last Supper in John is several chapters, but John never mentions in the account of the Last Supper the institution of the Eucharist. Yet the bread of life discourse we see is set at the time of Passover, and John in this discourse is trying to give the people of his time a look at Christ's theology and an understanding of the Eucharist as Christ gave it to us by developing this theology of the bread of life. And we've seen it as bread as nourishment for life, drink as necessary for life, that Christ gave bread for this life, for spiritual life, for a journey to eternal life. Today the discourse actually mentions Christ, saying that this bread that he gives is his actual flesh, his actual blood. The idea of flesh and blood, especially blood, is very distasteful for the Jews. They ate flesh, of course. When they sacrificed the Passover lamb, they ate part of the lamb that was given back to them to eat. The rest was offered up in sacrifice. But the blood was always poured over the altar. Never were they to drink in any way blood. But Christ gave bread and wine and said, "This is my flesh." In some way, he is saying a miraculous thing is happening, that this bread is going to be his very flesh, this wine his very blood. And as the grain is taken and crushed and ground together with other grains, and water is added and fired like a sacrifice, which his body was, that becomes his flesh in the form of bread when it is done in the Eucharist. The grapes are crushed together, fermented, and become our drink. Now, bread, we know, is a nutritious thing. It's something that is a staple and has been a staple throughout the ages of what people eat. Wine is a little different. It's not the necessary thing like water. Wine is a little bit more festive. And Christ is saying that in the Eucharist that he tells us to do in his memory, there's a certain festival or joyful aspect to his sacrifice, because his sacrifice frees us for life here and life forever. So John is saying that in doing the Eucharist, in coming together, which the church throughout the centuries is centered on the altar of Christ's flesh, Christ's blood, being offered to his Father and shared with us to give us nourishment and strength for the journey, give us spiritual strength to go out and live our daily lives. And this is what is the beauty of the Eucharist, is that Christ himself is our food, our drink. He comes physically within our bodies and fills us and gives us spiritual strength at the same time. And this is the theology John is giving to us in the Bread of Life discourse, and is something that I think is a wonderful thing to contemplate and something to look at during the week and go back and read the whole thing at one time.